Hello everyone, today I'm going to give you a very quick introduction to Docker and some of the things that you can do with it. So unlike virtual machines, Docker containerizes its application essentially into a file that you can run on other systems. It's similar to virtual machines in that, with a virtual machine, you can export a virtual machine and re-import it into another environment. However, what you've got to remember with virtual machines is that you've got a whole operating system underneath that you need to look after. So, the good thing with Docker is you haven't got that complexity of an operating system that you need to patch. You need to, make sure that there aren't conflicts with, system binaries and things like that. You can have a group of Docker hosts and run a variety of Docker containers that have been pre-built, or equally build your own. So today I'm going to just show you a couple of very simple ones. So the first thing you need to do when you have a host is run this here. So I've actually already got Docker running on this system, but essentially it goes to this URL here, get.docker.com, which is a shell script, and it's piping that to actually execute what's in that location. I've already had a look in there just to make sure that I'm happy with what's being installed, and I am. But here now is the shell script running, and obviously for me it's a lot quicker to install. But it goes through, it installs some, in my case, RPMs, so that we can use Docker. Now, one of the things that we need to make sure is that Docker is actually running on the system. So for that we need systemctl. So let's go ahead, systemctl, start Docker, and that will go ahead and start Docker for you. You may want to make it run on boot, so we're going to go ahead and enable that. Again, I've already got Docker running, so these commands here don't really do anything. So firstly, I'm going to look at a web server. So a web server is very good to be used as a container. So one of the great things is that we have available to us is Docker Hub. So Docker Hub, which I'll show you here, is a repository of images created by either, big companies like Oracle, Red Hat, or even, yourself. You could create your own image and put it in Docker Hub. There are literally millions of images that you can use here. For today's example, I'm going to search for NGINX. And there's going to be a few different NGINX. Bitnami have got a lot of images on here. This is an NGINX version by Canonical, who make Ubuntu, and it goes on, and there'll be more and more and more. We're going to use the official NGINX image. And if we have a look in here, it actually gives some examples of how to, start using Docker, how to start running this NGINX image. Now, this image is nearly okay. But there are a couple of things that, we would want to change with this command. So let's take that image, take that command, and go and have a look at what it is actually doing. So here we've got Docker run, and we've got to give the container a name. Let's call it web1. Now, this -v is a volume. So there's several different volumes in Docker. You can create a system volume that you can interact with, which is like a small little file system, or you can do mounting, which is in demonstrations and things like that, it's a lot easier to do. There's documentation that you can go and read about the differences, and why you would use one over another. In this example, I'll show you in a minute that I actually have in root NGINX content some content that I wish to use. Now, for those that have used NGINX before as a web server, by default, user share NGINX HTML is the location in which files are served from, if you don't set up your virtual host and things like that. So we're going to keep that same location because we're not changing the config of this web server at this stage. And RO is saying that we're mounting this as read-only. I'm actually going to take that out because I'm going to make some changes just to show you that it's working. And then we're obviously using the NGINX container image. There's one thing missing in here, and I'm just going to stop that for a minute to also show you this volume. But the one thing that's missing in here as well is which port we're going to be exposing, and to be able to see this. So if you do not list which port you're going to be exposing, you can't get to that outside of this server. So first and foremost, the volume. So this volume in NGINX content, I have got index.html. So it just says Docker NGINX. Very simple HTML file, which I'm hoping will now be served up. So if we go back and have a look at here, got Docker run, the name of the Docker instance, the container instance that I'm going to be using, the volume that I'm mounting, which container I'm using, and then the one bit that we need to add in is a -p for the ports. So we're just going to do it on port 80. So which port we want to use, and then which port within the container, and this is just going to expose that. So if I go and run that, by default, if you do not add anything past NGINX, it just puts latest on the end. So it's saying here it's been unable, I haven't got the image locally, so it's pulled that straight from Docker Hub, downloaded that, and if we now did a Docker PS, you can see that that's running. It's been up for 10 seconds, and here are the ports, right? So we've got port 80 is exposed on port 80. So if we were to now go to, well, first of all, let's get its IP address. So there's a 10.20.054 IP address. So if we do 10.20.054, you can see there it says Docker NGINX. Now, if I go into NGINX content and change this Docker NGINX version 2 and save that file, it will instantly change. And that is obviously local to me. Now in production, you would do a Docker build. You would actually build an image, probably package all your content within your image and push that, and it would be static. But in this example, and certainly for development, that's not something that you would do. So we've now got NGINX running, which is great. What I want to do is show you how you can do more containers. So back over to the Docker Hub, I'm going to have a look at something a lot of developers use, and that's Jenkins. So Jenkins as well have an official image. Here it is. And you can see here it says deprecated, use Jenkins LTS. And where I explained earlier that you can use a latest to run Jenkins. What is quite interesting is that, and I only noticed this the other day actually, if we were to run Jenkins, right? So if we could take that same command, okay? We're going to expose port 8080 because that's what Jenkins runs on. We're going to run Jenkins. We do need a path mounted. Now let me go and find out. It says in its instructions down here somewhere. So here is how to run it. So we need 8080 and 50,000. So let's put that in. And then it's a volume of var Jenkins. Now, I've actually not got a Jenkins directory yet, but let's do root Jenkins data. Okay, I'm just going to cross that out for a minute. Now in here I don't actually have a Jenkins data, so I'm going to go and create one. Now as we read through this, you'll see here it says this stores your Jenkins data and ensure that your home directory is accessible by the Jenkins user in the container, and the Jenkins user that they're using is UID 1000, or you can do a -u and pick a different user. So what we need to make sure is that this directory is actually readable by the user ID of 1000. Now, user ID of 1000 on this machine is myself, but what we can do is just do a chown 1000 group 1000 to the Jenkins data. Now, if we didn't do this, the container actually stops working and it won't run. So if we now have a look at this, the last thing we need to do here is just call it Jenkins. If we run this, it fails. Unable to find image Jenkins latest. Now, if you remember, we read earlier, it says deprecated, use Jenkins LTS. So it's tried to look for latest, but latest isn't there. So we need to rack and add LTS on the end of this. Sorry, it's Jenkins LTS. Yes. So Jenkins LTS. And there we go. It starts downloading that image from Docker Hub. And then once that's finished, you should be able to see a Docker PS and see now that Jenkins is running here and NGINX is running. So one thing we can do now is using the container ID. If we do Docker logs and do here, if we actually go to the URL for Jenkins, we'll see Jenkins signing up. Now it says to ensure Jenkins, we need to go and find the initial admin password. And that says it here. Jenkins initial setup is required. This can be found here. Now, if you were to do that just here, it's not going to work because you're not in the container. Now, there's two ways of doing this. We can either get inside the container and go and look at that file, or we've actually blindly mounted that file into Jenkins data, right? So in here, if we go in here, var Jenkins home, no, sorry, it won't be in Jenkins. We mounted Jenkins data into var Jenkins home, so we just need secrets initial admin password, and here it is. And for the eagle-eyed viewers out there, you'll see that the password is also here, and it was outputted in the logs when we did a Docker log.